everybody, it's Sue and Sal and we're here for week 9, and this week we're just going to start out and take a walk around the garden, take a look at everything, see how everything's doing, and we'll take a look at the trellis.
So here we are. This is some of our herbs that we've got in the garden, and as you can see, these basils are really looking good. So, you know, if your plants are at this size, you can definitely start eating them. Start taking maybe some of the lower leaves. They're just going to keep growing from this main stem and putting out more leaves. They're also, a lot of them might start branching here. So these branches are just going to keep growing up and out and putting on more growth. And then over here, we've got our tomatoes. They're also filling out really nicely. So hopefully yours are starting to get some flowers on them, put on a lot more of this green growth. And the tomatoes, as long as you're keeping them maybe a little bit maintained, trying to keep them a little bit up off the ground, they're just going to keep growing and branching out as well. And over here, you know, our parsley is a little bit slower growing, so I might give it another week or two before I start nibbling on it. And there's also a little bit of an empty space here, and I think we're going to find something to put in there in a little bit. Over here we've got our kale. And this kale, just like the basil, it's getting really nice, a lot of good new green growth. So I would say you can start eating some of the lower leaves. And kale is going to be a super cool looking plant if you're starting to eat the lower leaves, because it will actually get really tall, a lot taller than a lettuce. And you can just harvest this, you know, until frost. Here's our cabbages, and they're putting on a lot of leaves. You might notice on yours we've got a little bit of bug damage here. So for the most part, you know, they look really nice. This one is just getting nibbled on by something, but it's not too bad, you know, for us to be really concerned, but we might take a look at what we can do to deter those pests. And otherwise, all the rest of our brassica crops look really good. So there's not too much pest pressure. And finally, our cucumbers are putting on flowers, and these guys were off to a little bit of a slow start. So they're still pretty small plants, but they are putting on flowers. And you might notice in yours, I notice right here, we have some tiny, tiny little cucumbers just starting to form. So maybe another week or two and we'll have some baby cucumbers.
So here we have our beets and our carrots. They're really coming in. They're getting pretty big. I think next week we'll talk about if they need to be thinned or not. But this week what I'm noticing is that we've got some good growth and that we've got some weeds. So we're going to make sure and get this weeded. Now that we can see our rows really well, it'll be much easier to do that. And up here, our beans are getting really big, so they're doing great. I don't see any flowers yet, but there should be flowers soon on these, so we'll keep an eye on that. Let's take a look at our zucchini here. We've got some nice flowers here going on, and we've also got some little tiny fruit. Look at, here's one. We might even have zucchini to eat in a week or so. So that's exciting. And then over here, I guess just kind of noting that this is one of the issues with mulching your pathways, is that sometimes the weeds come in right along the edge of the mulch. So that's just something to be aware of. I probably should have run through this with a hoe faster than I did, so we'll get that cleaned up. And the broccoli is looking great. Our peppers are struggling a little bit, so I did give them some fish. We'll see if that kind of helps them perk up a little bit. And the cauliflower is looking good. And check out the growth on these winter squash. So you can see these have really started to take off. So as Sal said, hopefully you're seeing kind of the same thing in your garden. And you know, if you're not and you have any questions, let us know.
So here we are with our makeshift tomato trellis. So we just strung some twine onto some T-posts, and then one of the really just simple ways to keep your tomatoes up off the ground is just tie some more twine drop it down, and then kind of tie it around the tomatoes so that they stay upright. And these tomatoes, whatever this variety is doing a really good job. It's a very sturdy, stout plant already. But just to help it out, I'm going to take the twine and find a good spot on the main stem, and I'm just going to get this through. And then I'm going to tie it loosely here because the tomato plant, it's going to get bigger. The main stem will get bigger, so you don't want to tie it really tight because that can cut off like the circulation in the plant. It can actually kill the plant. So I've tied just this really loose circle around it, and that's going to make sure that if the plant gets pretty top heavy, that it's going to stay up. And also I will add a few more strings throughout the season, and as it gets taller, maybe just tie another string to it, you know, about a foot apart, so that the whole plant has a couple different strings that are just holding it up. And same with the cucumbers, is I'm just going to tie a string to them so they'll vine outwards a little bit, and they'll probably fill in this space, but then they can also vine upwards, and it just makes better use of our vertical space. A final note on tomatoes is tomatoes are a plant that you can prune pretty heavily if you want to maintain a smaller space, and you're still going to get good fruit yields. But sometimes tomatoes just grow out of control. So if you have a tomato plant and it's really getting too big and you want to make it a little bit smaller, you can go down and if you see how tomatoes grow, at every node here they've got 2 sets of leaves. So if this, I'm gonna go with this node right here. So as you can see, there's this lower leaf, and this is just this big like vegetative leaf, and this I guess leaf that's coming out of here, it's actually turning into a branch. So these branching ones are the ones you want to take off if your plant is getting too big. These guys are just, you know, they're photosynthesizing, they're feeding the plant, but these ones are just going to keep making more and more and more side branches. So I'd actually go to the bottom and maybe cut off like this big branch right here, and maybe this one right here. And now you don't want to over prune your plants, so you never want to take off more than like a quarter of this entire plant when you're pruning. But if you want them to take up a little bit less space and just not get so out of control, you can absolutely just prune off a few of those extra branches.
So as the season goes on here, you might find that you have a little extra space in your garden, or maybe something isn't doing very well and so you want to replace it. And you just want to make sure that you know that you don't have to put your whole garden in at once, and as the season goes along, you can fill in, you can add things, you can replace things that you've harvested. So one of the things you could still put in are potatoes. I found some potatoes in my fridge that were sprouting, and so these little sprouts are going to grow into plants, and I'm just going to pop these in the ground. They need to go in real deep, so you're going to want to dig a pretty good hole, and put them down there with the little sprouts facing up, and just cover them up. So that's one option for something that you can plant right now. Potatoes. We're also going to plant a few seeds. We're going to put in some greens and some radishes, so I'll go grab those. So we're also going to put in a little bit of a loose leaf lettuce mix, which is just the kind of thing that you plant and then cut. You don't let them go to head. So we're going to just put in a really tiny little row here, and as Sal had showed you before, you just make yourself a little trench, and you can just put a few seeds in and cover them up. And I think Sal had mentioned, but you want to make sure seeds, a good rule of thumb is that a seed should get buried about 3 times as deep as it is big. That's a really rough rule of thumb, but it's a good thing to keep in mind that a smaller seed, you're just not going to want to put it in very deep. So we're just got a little row of mixed lettuce here, and then we'll put in some radishes. I'm going to do a short little row of radishes here, and again, about 3 times as deep as they are big, and we'll just sprinkle them in here and cover them up.
So another thing to consider about this garden and why it's doing so well is that over the maybe a 3-day period this weekend, we got probably 1.5 inches of rain. So if you are in the same climate as us, if you're in this area, you might have noticed, we got a lot of rain and stuff is really responding to that. So that is really helpful, and now we won't have to water for a couple more days, and it really helped all this really lush plant growth.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to mention too with thunderstorms, if you've noticed, a lot of times after a thunderstorm, your lawn will really green up. And that's because lightning actually changes the nitrogen that's in the atmosphere and turns it into a form that plants can absorb. And then the rain brings it down. And so not only did we get rain, but we got some thunder and lightning, which meant we got some rain that had some nitrogen in it. So that was really awesome for our plant growth. And I just wanted to show you all, I had been wishing we had a rain gauge here in the garden, and I thought about buying one. And then I hopped online and realized that it's actually quite simple to make one. So this is a mason jar, and I just put some inch markings on it. And really the thing you have to keep in mind is that it has to be a cylinder. It can't be a cone-shaped vessel. It has to be a cylindrical vessel so that it's the same width, top and bottom. And as long as that's the case, you can just mark off the inches. This is not going to be very exact, but it is going to give us a good idea of how much rain we're getting. And if we leave it right out in the garden, we can also use it to tell, if we're using a sprinkler, it'll tell us how much water our garden is getting from our sprinkler in addition to the rain.
So the reason that we chose our lettuce and radish to fill in some of these empty spaces is because they are really quickly maturing crop. So at this point in the season, we've still probably got maybe like 90 days left in our growing season. So, you probably don't want to start anything that's a super like long season crop. So you wouldn't be able to start tomatoes or peppers by seed. They just wouldn't be able to grow fast enough to really get much of a harvest. But there's a lot of plants that actually grow pretty quickly. So radishes are probably the quickest crop. They can be ready in anything from like 21 to 27 days. So that's pretty quick. Otherwise, lettuces, beets, turnips, they're pretty quick. Some different herbs are pretty quick.
Yeah, you can even put in another round of carrots. We might do that, put another round of carrots and beets in. Another round of beans. Beans would still have time. So like Sal said, it's kind of all about days to maturity, and there's still plenty of time left in the growing season.
Yeah.
So is that, I think, what we were going to cover this week? Are we?
Yep.
So thanks again for coming, and as always, make sure and put your comments or your questions down in the comments, and we'll try and get you answers. And I guess that's it for week 9 of the Victory Gardens.
Yep.
Thanks for coming.
See ya.
And now we're going to take a look at some more of your Victory Gardens. These first couple are from Barb Barrett, and she's got a really cool, clever row marking device here and some really nice covered raised beds. And she also included a photo of her garden helper / security, Jameson. And then we've got a different approach here from Tara Rose. She's using lots of mulch in her garden. And she's got the fenced-in garden. It's really fun to see the different ways that people are growing their Victory Gardens. And then here's some deer, bear, raccoon protection, courtesy of Terry Power. Keep sharing the photos of your gardens and join us on the Facebook page, Amory Victory Gardens.